Welcome to the video lecture for statistics. This is STA 2023. My name is Jorge Gavillan, and so this is the textbook that we're going to be using. Is the Elementary Statistics Mario F. Triola 13th edition. And so hopefully you guys can find this textbook on Amazon, or you can rent it at the bookstore for a lot cheaper than having to purchase. So one of the things that we're going to be learning in this course, obviously, is statistical methods. Now, many statistical methods give us tremendous power to better understand the world in which we live. One of the things that I like to think about in this class is it allows you to think in a critical way about information that that's provided to you. Now, unfortunately, one of the side effects of this is that some of these methods can be used in a way that's fundamentally unethical. So it's important to consider some of the ethical issues as we study statistics. And in this section, we're going to consider such issues that are related to the collection of data, the analysis, and the reporting of data. So the first thing we're going to talk about is human treatment when obtaining data. So there are many research studies in which the health and safety of research subjects were compromised so that others might benefit. And so there are prisoner studies and also the Milgram experiment. And we're going to be talking about these in class a little bit more. And the next thing is the common rule, which is described later in this section, which protects human research subjects in the United States. So the first thing is sampling bias. And so researchers can intentionally or unintentionally bias their study by using a sample that is in fact biased. So sampling bias can seriously distort results and can lead to wrong or misleading conclusions. So this can be done intentionally or unintentionally, and we'll talk about both of those. So the first thing is cherry picking. In some cases, researchers intentionally use biased samples to ensure that the result that they obtain is what they want. The next thing is non-respondent bias. So non-respondent bias occurs when those who do not respond to a survey differ from those who do respond. And two aspects of a survey topic that affect responses are salience and also social desirability. The next thing is interviewer bias. A manner in which a question is framed may affect the response. So, for example, there's a bridge that connects two towns. It needs to be repaired. And so it can be framed in terms of raising taxes, or it can be framed in terms of safety. And the way that it's framed can affect the response. The next one is volunteer bias. So people who volunteer to participate constitute a voluntary response sample. And they often have different characteristics when compared to participants who are selected by those conducting the survey. The next thing is analysis. So research findings often are distorted by improper analysis. So even though the sample data may be inconclusive, insufficient, or supportive of a result that's not desired by the researcher, sometimes researchers succumb to pressures to report the findings as being significant or conclusive. And this can be through either negligent or unethical analysis. So one of the biggest things is falsified data. So a notable example of data falsification is found in the original study that suggests a link between childhood vaccines and autism. Please be aware that this study was actually retracted, and so unfortunately, the general population, there's still many groups out there that think that there is a link, or still at least a real link between these two variables. And we'll talk about some other ones in class. And I do apologize, I have a cold, so please bear with me. The next one is inappropriate statistical methods. So the inappropriate use of statistical methods may lead to incorrect findings and distorted results, even if the data is sound. The next one, which we'll talk about later as the course progresses, is significance level. And again, some of these things that I'm going to be mentioning right now, you have no idea what they are, but eventually you will. Now, it's a good practice to select the significance level for a hypothesis test before collecting sample data and finding a p-value. It is bad practice to later adjust the significance level in order to make results appear to be significant when they did not appear to be significant based on the original significance level. And again, when we get into hypotheses testing, a lot of this is going to make sense. So right now you're sort of like, I have no idea what this is. Uh, So there are other opportunities for unethical practices occur with the interpretation of statistical results and the decision of how and where to report findings. And personal and self-serving interests may influence final conclusions and recommendations. So there's conflict of interest, ghostwriting. Uh, so an example of medical ghostwriter is someone who makes a contribution to the writing of a research study or an article, but is not acknowledged in the published work. And this doesn't just happen in the medical field. It happens in economics, it happens in political science, and it happens everywhere. So not just ghostwriting. So you have to be, not just medical, sorry. So you have to be careful when you read an article or something is presented to you. You have to be aware of who wrote this, where is it coming from. And so another conflict of interest would be financial support. Now, there was a passage of a federal law in 2010 that requires companies to disclose payments for goods and services provided to physicians or teaching hospitals. Now, while this law does not prohibit financial relationships between companies and physicians or teaching hospitals, it does require them to disclose these relationships. The next thing is reporting of non-significant results. So if we have a sampling error of 4%, and again, this will become you'll understand what this means as the course progresses. A 3% drop in respondents who indicated that they were in favor of death penalty is not significant. So we don't really know whether there's a decrease, an increase, or no change in opinions about the death penalty. And this is related to your sampling error and also the number of data points, if you will, of respondents. The next thing we're going to talk about is the common rule. So the common rule has been established in the United States as the standard of ethics for biomedical and behavioral research involving human subjects. So this is the baseline standard for any government-funded research in virtually all academic institutions. So some of the central themes to the common rule is that people who participate as subjects in covered research are selected equitably and give their fully informed, fully voluntary written consent. And also that the proposed research to be reviewed by independent oversight group referred to as the IRB, Institutional Research Review Board. So if you conduct any research, let's say for a master's thesis or for a PhD or an EDD, and you have human subjects, it has to go through IRB before you can conduct your research. And so once it's approved, only if risks to subjects have been minimized and reasonable in relation to the anticipated benefits, if any, to the subjects, and the importance of the knowledge that might be reasonably gotten from this research. Next thing is, as consumers of data, it's important to have a healthy view when statistics are cited in anything that you see. And so whenever information is presented to you, some of the things that you should be asking is who is reporting about the study, and do they have any financial or personal interest in the outcome? And so you should not just accept whatever is given to you. You have to be critical. You have to look at it with a critical eye. And if nothing else, that's what I hope you take from this course. Now, how was the sample data obtained? Right? What is the potential for bias? Have these findings been reviewed or replicated by peers or anyone else? And this is really important. In academic circles, we have peer review. So if I were to conduct a study and publish it, or I want to publish it in a journal, it gets reviewed by my peers. And then after it passes, literally what the smell is a smell test, then it gets published. So you can't just publish anything in an academic journal. The other thing is replication of your study, and this is really big in data science. If I conduct a study and I reach a result, I provide the raw data to other researchers, and they should be able to replicate what I got. If they're unable to do that, then there's a problem with what I did. And then another thing is, what specifics do they provide about the methods to use? What is the margin of error, the confidence interval, the p-value, the effect size, and so on and so on. So researchers must always adhere to the highest ethical standards in their work. We should all strive to behave ethically as follows. Be complete and honest about the findings, even if the results are not what you expected or desired. And this is a big thing with students. We do complete labs and projects in this course, and so sometimes students feel that they have to either reject or not reject a null hypothesis, and that's not what we're looking for. Right? We're looking for the process of the data analysis, the collection, the data analysis, and then reporting the results. Whatever the results are, that's not really doesn't make it right or wrong. The next thing is seek the advice of professionals when unsure about which statistical analyses are appropriate. Disclose any financial relationships or any interest in the outcome of the research. Of course, this doesn't really apply to us, but you will be conducting a project which you will be collecting some data from people. And also acknowledge only to those who made a meaningful contribution to the study. So if someone really didn't do anything in your paper, then there's no need to mention them. And if they did, then they should be mentioned. Be ready and willing to share data, raw data. This is a good way to know whether you can trust an article or a conclusion that you see. Is have they shared the raw data with other researchers? If they're holding on to that raw data, then to me personally, it doesn't pass the smell test. Methods, how did they get to where they got? The analysis, what did they do? What tests did they perform? And also the results. And then also clearly identify any assumptions, limitations, or astounding questions in the research. And usually, in any paper that we read, towards the end of the paper, they put the limitations of the study. So we did A, B, and C, but there are some limitations, right? We wish we could have done D, if you will, but we were unable because of blah blah blah.